collection of mid-century literature, it may seem perverse to look at just a textbook. But it is precisely his role at the center of the literary market that made me curious about how he would shape reading and writing practices for a generation of students brought up in this milieu. The first edition of The Preceptor was sold as 2 octavo volumes. Volume 1 is 384 pages, plus more than a dozen fold-out pages of maps, graphs, and illustrations. Volume 2 is 546 pages. So this is, 900 pages. It's big, it's bulky. The price was 12 shillings, or more than half a pound, at a time when a footman might make a mere £8 a year. The Preceptor is not an inexpensive book. But it purported to do much. Aimed at the school market, but likely used for self-educators as well, the Preceptor covered all the major areas of study. Serving as what we would now call the general editor, Dodsley collected articles from scholars with whom he was acquainted through his vast network of publishing acquaintances and writers. Johnson wrote the preface as well as the narrative, The Vision of Theodore, which he later described as the, quote, the best thing he ever wrote, though Johnson's biographer begs to differ. And the book was extremely successful. Dodsley's brother and heir was still publishing the 8th edition almost 50 years later. It was also abridged, excerpted, revised without permission, plagiarized, and imitated in Great Britain and in North America. James Boswell described it as, quote, one of the most valuable books for the improvement of young minds that has appeared in any language. Though we know Boswell never exaggerated anything that Johnson was involved in. The entire American Adams family read it. John Adams mentions it in his diary, Abigail in her correspondence, and John Quincy Adams reminisces fondly about it as well. It was used in several Scottish universities, at the University of Pennsylvania and Columbia. In the rest of my paper, I will examine what might be called the technological politics of the Preceptor, how it purports to solve the problem of print by embodying the very values of print. Since most of the collection is really an anthology of sorts, with writers brought in from amongst Dodsley's coterie of cultural producers, the introductory material is all the more important, as it supplies the rationale, the methodology, and coherence to a work that is threatened by the centrifugal force of disparate disciplinary agendas. Furthermore, since the sections on many of these are from older works, they tend to reflect the values of earlier in the century. It is the extra compositional actions taken and notes written by Dodsley, which I'll discuss, in addition to the preface written by Johnson, that spin the scholarship as a whole in a specific direction, even when the direction is contrary to the values of an individual chapter. I'm going to start with the preface then and work backwards to other front material and then discuss a few of the sections themselves. And I just wanted to show you this on Google Books quickly. So you have, you've seen the front page. You have this proclamation by George II, which I'll discuss, and the dedication, and then the preface. First, I think it's important to understand how the book markets itself and to whom. It is clear from the preface that this is to be a work for the middling classes by its statement of what it is not. In examining the treatises heretofore offered to the youth of this nation, there appeared none that did not fail in one or other of these essential qualities, none that were not either unpleasing or abstruse or crowded with learning very rarely applicable to the purposes of common life. So this book, The Preceptor, is to be both pleasing and pertinent, a text that will actually train students for the work of their futures. It claims to provide variety that will please students at multiple levels. It is, quote, intended to correspond with all dispositions and afford entertainment for minds of different powers, end quote, which is why it, quote, contains treatises on different subjects. Indeed, there is more to be said, not in this paper, on the idea of individualizing students instead of grouping them into classes of learning, as well as multidisciplinarity emerging from the multiplicity of individuals instead of an a priori need for breadth in each individual. Yet, although this book addresses what is seen as, quote, restless desire of novelty, which gives teachers so much trouble, and claims that it is better adapted to the great design of pleasing by instruction, it also asserts that limits must be imposed on both entertainment as well as depth of knowledge, which in itself can become a form of entertainment, when one must be trained for a profession. The preface further explains that the book, quote, is drawn up for readers yet unexperienced in life and unable to distinguish the useful from the ostentatious or unnecessary parts of science. It is thus requisite that a very nice distinction should be made, that nothing unprofitable should be admitted for the sake of pleasure, nor any arts of attraction neglected that might fix the attention upon more important studies. So while pleasure in learning is to be encouraged, the student properly trained for the middling sorts of jobs needs to know which learning will be profitable. At the same time, Dodsley is aware that in this burgeoning age of the novel, an age in which the print trade itself has guaranteed that the multiple entertainment products for young readers are competing with more studious pursuits for their time and attention, the most important areas of knowledge must be made attractive. I think my next article is going to be on 18th century ADD, because this is all over in every book. These students are so distracted, they're so distractible, we need to give them pleasure and entertainment. Thus, this book also, perhaps primarily, positions Dodsley as an arbiter, not for taste, but for learning. For by the 1740s, the marketplace of ideas, or more precisely, the market of knowledge products, the means through which to obtain knowledge, is flooded. As the preface points out, this book appears, quote, at a time when so many schemes of education have been projected, so many proposals offered to the public, so many schools open for general knowledge, and so many lectures in particular sciences attended, at a time when mankind seems intent rather on familiarizing than enlarging the several arts, and every age, sex, and profession is invited to an acquaintance with these studies, which were formerly supposed accessible only to such as had devoted themselves to literary leisure. The editor here is thus figured as the ideal source to choose the best for the hordes of learners who are configured as passive consumers of information and aesthetics, those who want familiarity with the arts but do not contribute to them. This new learner appears as a result of the democratization of art. More people want access but have less time because they do work to devote to them. The editor's unique perspective, it is precisely his work that places him at the center of the network through which all, the editor's unique perspective is needed because it is precisely his work that places him in the center of the network through which all information flows. His labor is literature, its production, often from pen through print, and its promotion, yet he also uniquely understands the audience for these products because it is his job to both cater to their needs and create needs they did not yet realize they had. Because of the status responsibility in this labor, it is also particularly the editor's right to have this work protected. Thus, the very first page accessed by readers after the title is actually a proclamation by Lord Chesterfield writing for King George II as his Secretary of State, securing the copyright for Dodsley. Chesterfield at this time had been an acquaintance of Dodsley for over 10 years, a patron and promoter of Dodsley's many projects, notwithstanding Johnson's famous rebuke, a writer for some Dodsley publications, and an apocryphal author of others, and in general part of his network of cognoscenti. The proclamation justifies the granting of this copyright security. And I'm going to quote this long, kind of awkward text here, but it has a lot that's important here, I think. So the proclamation says, "The petitioner has been at great expense and trouble in procuring the several parts of the said work to be executed by persons qualified to do them in the best manner, and the sole right entitled to the copy of the same being vested in the petitioner. Wherefore he has humbly prayed us to grant him our royal privilege and license for the sole